when you see on the temple walls in Egypt the picture of the initiates with the net in their hands, the net is really the fabric of space-time. It is the vibrational grid behind every living being and every structure in the phenomenal world. The hieroglyphs that accompany this would often say something like, they are being taught how to catch and cast magic. But that's a translation of an old Egyptian term, and we should bear in mind the saying by the great science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, that magic is a term that we give for a form of technology that we cannot understand. And so that's exactly what's happening here. They're being taught how to use vibrational matrices, vibrational grids, that stands behind everything in the physical world, including the human physical body, is based on a specific vibrational grid. Here we have an interaction between one of these great beings and the pharaoh, and today when we translate the Egyptian text into English, we translate them so that it says that this is a god or a goddess, but that was not a concept from ancient Egypt. They didn't use the term god or goddess. They used the term NETER, and NETER is based on the hieroglyphic language that represents phonetics as the letters NTR. NETER means a conscious force of nature, and so there's no dichotomy for them between a conscious being and a force of nature. Whereas today we have a tremendous dichotomy, and we think of nature as being a clockwork mechanism that can be manipulated in some external way. But every classical tradition, particularly the ancient Egyptian, understood that the forces of nature are conscious. They can be communicated with. And part of the initiation process is learning how to communicate with the forces of nature. The term NETER, to refer to these beings, is the foundation for the modern English term nature. And so they are the conscious forces of nature, and the human initiate reaches out to connect to them, as you see with the hand grasping the arm. And then the NETER interacts with the person through particular forms held in the hand. So we have here the Waz scepter and the Ankh. Now these things are interpreted today by Egyptologists as being abstract symbols, so that the Ankh represents life, for example. But there's much more to it. These things are actually geometric energy emitters, that the shapes that they represented actually were the forms that emitted specific vibrational powers. And you'll note that the forms are being introduced around the area of the person's sinus cavities. And I went to a conference a year ago here in Silicon Valley. That was the TransTech conference, in which people were developing new technologies to be able to manipulate human brain states. And many of these devices are based on inserting diodes into the nose and being able to activate aspects of the brain through flashing particular flicker rates with these LEDs that then directly affect brain states. Because they found that by inserting them up the nasal cavity, you can directly affect the brain. And so you can see they're doing the same thing here. There's a direct connection to the pineal pituitary and all of the forces in the third ventricle of the brain, what was called the cave of Brahma in the Himalayan tradition, through the introduction through the sinus cavity. So the concept here is that the initiate is learning how to communicate with the netters, and that geometric forms emanate specific types of energy that are a part of the initiation and allow them to manipulate the net. And so when we see all these pictures, once again, of the geometric energy emitters that are being used for interaction between the netters, the higher conscious forces of nature, and human beings who are at the higher initiate level, this was understood by the French to be related to what they named the shape-caused wave, meaning that there are particular subtle radiations coming from geometric shapes and forms. That is the true science of sacred geometry. Much of what we describe in modern metaphysics with sacred geometry is an intellectual aspect of it, but not the actual energy science of it. In ancient Egypt, they used the energy science of sacred geometry and the power of the shape-caused wave. So the Ankh is not just an intellectual symbol that represents life. It actually emanates a penetrating carrier wave from its base and the opposite vibrational wave from its top. That's why in pictures from ancient Egypt, you'll sometimes see the top going toward the nasal cavity into the brain of the person, and sometimes they'll be turned around the other way for the base. They're completely polar opposite energies we'll be describing as what the French called the positive green and negative green vibrations. Negative green is a very powerful carrier wave, very penetrating. This is an artifact that the French researchers found in the Louvre Museum. It was brought back by the Napoleonic expeditions. And the shapes on the side combine to create a vibration at the top where they would place a vessel, and the liquid in the vessel would receive a composite vibrational wave from the totality of the shapes. So this then led the way to other researchers, such as de Balazal, to be able to use the equipment that they developed to directly detect these subtle vibrations, to be able to do a type of vibrational spectral analysis. So just as in modern science and technology we use electromagnetic spectral analysis to understand the component energetics of any system, so this can be done at a vibrational level with much more subtle energies as well. So for example, here de Balazal is able to detect the different vibrational qualities, and they're referring to the vibrational qualities in terms of colors. But what we must understand is that color is only one way that a vibration can manifest. This is what we call quality scales in biogeometry. An invisible vibration can manifest in the scale of light or pigment as a color. It can manifest in the scale of sound as a tone. It can manifest in the scale of shape as a particular geometric form. So these archetypal vibrational powers can manifest in different qualities, but they referred to them in the French work through the names of colors because that was something people could directly relate to. So here, by testing the vibrations within the system, they could test water quality, for example, and the different bands of vibration that they had in their vibrational spectrum that they identified would allow them to find out if it contained various types of harmful pathogens or if it was drinkable, and what type of pathogens there are. There would be different vibrational waves for dangerous chemicals than if there were dangerous bacteria, for example. And so this becomes a vibrational method that is similar to our spectrum analysis. So for example, this is a complete periodic table with electromagnetic spectrum analysis. Now they could do the same thing at a vibrational level with much more subtle energies that could not be picked up by the equipment we use for spectral analysis. It also allowed them then to detect what is the subtle vibration coming from different disease states, and what then would be the vibration that would then counteract or neutralize that particular wave. So this was referred to as the ray of illness and the curative ray. Enel was a Russian who had trained in Kabbalistic healing and then had to leave Russia at the time of the Bolshevik Revolution and led a group of Russian immigrants to settle in Cairo. And so he wrote some remarkable works that were very inspirational for Dr. Karim in creating biogeometry. And so here you see the way that he's characterizing different illnesses and the wave that destroys the pathogen according to the different bands of the spectrum. So just as we have an electromagnetic spectrum, so we have a spectrum of these subtle radiations. Now, when we talk about these different bands having certain energies, again, describing them in terms of color is just one aspect. In many cases, they are completely invisible, or they manifest as a sound, or a shape, or an angle, or a proportion, or a numerical sequence, or a movement. They don't necessarily manifest as a color, but they could manifest as a color in light or pigment. And so when we talk about these different bands, I just want to give you a couple of quick examples. Let's say we use the orange band described by the French. The orange band could be found in natural substances and things like frankincense. Frankincense oil is full of the orange band. It doesn't look orange, but that's not the point of it. The vibrational quality is that of the orange band. You'd have to be able to test it to know that. But what does the orange band do? It stimulates the lungs, it clears the kidney and bladder. In fact, it is the orange band vibration that allows you to urinate and defecate. Just before a person urinates or defecates, their bladder or their colon will fill with the orange vibration, and that then leads to the purging effect. So one of the powers of orange is to purge energies. Energizes the thyroid, relieves muscle cramps and spasms, etc. At an energetic level, it purges, loosens, eliminates, cleanses, and it can also have even an explosive type of action to it. But at the emotional mental level, it promotes joy, happiness. It overcomes depression, discontent, fear. At the spiritual level, it was used by ancient initiates to help a person at the time of death to extract the spirit from the physical body. because it projects energy outward. It purges things out. So when they would use frankincense, they knew in the ancient traditions that when you applied it to a person's third eye center or to their crown, it would force a purging of the energy out of these centers, and then that center could then become active. But there's another vibration that is hidden inside of frankincense. In addition to the orange band vibration, there's also the gold vibration. The gold vibration actually allows the spiritual potential, the seed that's inside the energy centers, to begin to ripen and come forward. Now the thing is that in the original French works, they did not clearly describe, though, what the functions at all of these different levels were of all of the colors. So I spent about 25, 30 years doing research and putting together what the effects are of each of the bands of the vibrational spectrum identified by the French. Now, the most mysterious of the vibrations is what they call negative green. It's directly opposite the positive green energy quality here. That's what we think of as green. Opposite it is an invisible wave, almost never visible. If it was to be visible in light, it would appear as gray. Most of the time, it never actually appears as anything that you can actually see. Here's one of the great secrets of ancient Egypt and other old traditions, connected to the Shakti concept of the Himalayan tradition. And what it actually does is it is the carrier wave that sends all the other energies. It was found by the French it could penetrate thicknesses of lead that could not be penetrated by X-rays. And so they were fascinated by it. And so in applying the negative green carrier wave energy, it is what inside the physical body actually moves the energy from one location to another, makes the organs work. And it also sends things from one system to another system. It is what conducts the energy in the energy meridians of the body, like the acupuncture meridians from the Chinese tradition. It is the foundation of sexual energy and vitality in the body. At the emotional and mental level, it breaks down resistance, opening up blocked psychological aspects of a person to open to massive shifts in one's life, and brings subconscious blockages into awareness. At the spiritual level, it actually conducts the energy from higher plane levels into the human physical body. And the more spiritual activity a person does, blessing, prayer, meditation, etc., the stronger this vibration is from their energetic field. This is from my Universal Vibrational Spectrum course as a kind of summary. All of our modern technology is based on cracking two codes: the code of the spectrum of electromagnetic energy and the code of the spectrum of physical matter. We call the spectrum of physical matter the periodic table of elements, based on the work of Mendeleev in the late 1800s in Russia. Now, once we cracked the code where we identified every aspect of electromagnetic energy and every part of physical substance in the world, at that point they could put the two together. So all of our modern technology is based on knowing what exact elements from the periodic table to match with what frequencies from the electromagnetic spectrum. And that's what makes your cell phone work. That's what makes the lights work at your house. What makes your car run. Everything is based on a combination of these two things. But, as we often describe in the work of biogeometry, what they left out was the focus of every classical tradition, because it's only been the last couple of 100 years that modern science and medicine has only focused on the physical plane. Before that, every classical tradition focused on the level of vital life force and higher consciousness above the physical, and they manipulated those energies to be able to do things on the physical plane. They actually worked at the causative level above the physical that actually gives rise to the physical level itself. Today we manipulate the physical directly, the physical and the electromagnetic. There's often a confusion about vital life force being electromagnetic energy. And I don't believe that's actually the case. I think the best solution to this was given by the great Rosicrucian teacher Rudolf Steiner, where he described the way that the vital life force, which is the foundation of every classical scientific and healing system, is at a level above the physical. And that is like what was referred to as scalar waves by Nikola Tesla. And these higher energies from the vibrational level, referred to as the etheric in the Greek tradition, referred to as chi in the Chinese tradition, ki in Japan, prana in India, etc. Every tradition had a name for it. That energy penetrates down into the physical and animates physical substance. The human physical body without this is a corpse. It animates physical substance, but in so doing it slows down below the speed of light and begins to disintegrate. As it disintegrates, it gets to be retarded Hertzian waves as described by Tesla and becomes the electromagnetic spectrum. So the problem is that we've created a new technology that's very powerful for manipulating physical structures, but does not take into account what the effect of the vibrations from these are on actual living beings, because the actual living aspect of biological life has been stripped out of modern biology. If you try to talk about life force in modern biology, they will say that you are a victim of the vitalist fallacy. So the knowledge of thousands of years of observations and particular techniques in Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Mayan healing, all types of traditions all over the world have been completely cast out. But now, with having identified in modern times the electromagnetic and physical spectrums, the French succeeded in identifying the vibrational spectrum.